Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Hello once again, and welcome to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller, and Mike Hightower, of course, is with us here in studio. Mike Tolbert is back at the barn, and of course, Mike's on Mike is brought to you by our fine friends at the Jacksonville History Center and the Jacksonville Historical Society, Alan Bliss, and our fine donors. We thank you very, very much for your continued support of this show. Well, today it's just the three of us. We have no guest plan. We wanted instead just to discuss amongst the three of us some of the more important issues that the city has been facing here lately. Two of them, which really come to mind, is Jay Stowe's resignation as CEO of JEA and the appointment of longtime JEA fixture Vickie Cavey as the interim CEO. And the second one is the Laura Street Trio and the continuing sagas surrounding that and the relationship between the DIA, the Downtown Investment Authority, and the developer Steve Atkins. Let's begin with the JEA's board accepting Stowe's resignation, which came as a surprise to most everyone, I think, when it first came out. Mike Tolbert, why don't you kick us off on that?
Yeah, I think we all were a little surprised at the news. Maybe some of us, like Hightower, knew what was going on, but not many other people did. You know, let's take a look back. Stowe came to Jacksonville to run the JEA in 2020 as a seasoned utility professional, and part of his job, or a big part of his job, was to restore the credibility of the JEA as a top flight utility and restore employee morale. It was this board, when John Baker was the chair, that hired Stowe. And it was this board, with Bobby Stein as the chair, that decided it was time for him to go. Hightower and I both know Bobby pretty damn well. And shortly after that March 26th board meeting, when a lot of this started happening in public, Mike called me and said, why don't you turn on that meeting, go look at that meeting on YouTube, and tell me what you think Bobby's up to. And so I did, and I didn't know what Bobby was up to, but like Hightower, I thought he was probably up to something. And Mike, you remember that, I'm sure. Given that you were on the JEA board for 16 years and chair of the JEA board for 2 terms, and given your friendship with Bobby Stein, what were you thinking he was up to?
Let me tee it up. You're absolutely right. When and it was somebody beside Bobby Stein that called me and said, "Did you see Bobby? Did you see what Bobby said at the board meeting?" And I went, "No. As a matter of fact, I was sitting up in my place in North Carolina." I said, "I haven't really watched the board meeting." So he said, "Why don't you do that?" So I did, and I watched it twice. And what I saw, Mike Tolbert and our listeners, Bobby is one of the most underrated smart men I've ever known. He is incredible. His love for the city is unbelievable, but he is in some ways a financial genius. And as I watched him, and Mike Tolbert, you can relate to this, when you see Bobby uncomfortable in a public situation and he speaks, it's what he doesn't say that says there is something going on. And Bobby is a very low-key person. He is absolutely the person that you, as you would say, behind the curtain. And so Mike Tolbert, when I asked you, I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "There's something up." And when I heard Bobby talk about that we want to have Vickie come in, so we have someone who is helping us to understand there's a relationship. We need a liaison between senior management and the board. And having sat on that board, that is a red flag when you hear a board member say, we need to hire someone so there's better communications between we, the board, and senior management. And
Can I interrupt just for a half second? Did you experience any communication problems when you were on the board with the senior leadership and with the CEO at the time?
No. Because I got to remember, I was there under Walt, I was under there with Jim, and I was under there with Paul.
Yep.
And all those men, particularly when you were the chairman, we always had incredible conversations. Now, the board members can't speak, of course, but there was never a problem. One of the issues I had, which I'll talk about Vickie Cavey, was back then when Walt was there, and Mike Tolbert will remember this, when we got the board...
That's, by the way, Walt Bucells.
Walt Bucells. Yeah. When we got the board agenda and we were going through, it would be a book 6 or 7 inches thick. Mm. Now, for somebody who, spent 3.5 years in junior college, being a slow learner, I said, maybe somebody needs to help me with this. But anyway, so going back to Bobby, it was a red flag. And what really concerned me, which we'll probably get into this, is having been an employee, if you all remember, during the Zahn situation, and Lee and I left before it hit the fan, but was aware that it was going to hit the fan. We'll leave it at that. And knowing how it really sort of shook up everyone and this whole city went through hell, if you remember correctly, with the possible sale of it, what was going on, and then all of a sudden, this meeting was in public or it was up in Atlanta, and all this kind of thing.
And the pup.
And the pup. You can imagine what that did to the employees. So when I heard that there was a problem, going back to what I called Mike Tolbert, and I said, Mike, something's wrong, and this is not good. And so that's really what I did. And so as we will see, as a matter of fact, yesterday, everybody will read about it, Jay stepped away. He resigned as CEO. But I will tell you, I'm glad to know that Mike, who is a very good friend of Bobby Stein's like myself, Mike Tolbert obviously read the same body language as I did with Bobby Stein. And
well, you're right. He very seldom speaks in public. When I watched that meeting, and at the end, he started talking about fiduciary responsibility and communication. Yeah, and it was obvious. And at that point, I had not spoken to Bobby about any of this. I don't know that you had either, but it was obvious he had some problems. I had no idea that within another couple of weeks, that would explode like it did. But I watched the meeting, this last meeting when Stowe resigned, on my computer, and Stowe was brought in here to calm the waters. And that was one of the reasons he was brought in. And I think he's gotten a lot of credit for that. And it impressed me, Mike, at that meeting where you spoke. And boy, you think it didn't surprise me when I was watching the meeting and you get up to the podium to start talking. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But how many employees came to the microphone, especially union leaders, came to the microphone and started talking about Jay Stowe in favorable terms? And then on the screen, in addition to seeing the meeting going on up in the corner, comments would keep popping up from people who were watching, and one after another and another and another. And it was mostly great comments supporting Stowe, or saying what a good man he was and how much they've enjoyed. Questions about what's going on, what's happening, why is this happening? Is the JEA up for sale again? So you obviously, Mike, and you're really close to these employees, these people. You've been close to them for a long time, especially the front line. I'm sure that today there's a lot of concern still over there. How does Vickie Cavey, what would you tell Vickie Cavey to do to try to bring some more calm over there and assure all the employees that everything's going to be just fine?
Let's go back to the pop that popped up on the screen. Because board members cannot talk to each other before the meeting, so when Bobby, number one is they can't talk. So what happened was, if you remember, the first article that came out about a possible resignation, let's put it in context here, the story was based on a comment that Councilman Rory Diamond said, I think that Jay Stowe is going to resign. Now, again, councilmen can do anything they want. But the first 3 or 4 articles that came out, it was Rory Diamond that says, I believe, rumor has it, that he's going to resign.
Now, wasn't Rory Diamond the liaison from City Council to JEA?
No, Mike Boylan.
No, that's Boylan.
Mike Boylan is.
So where does he get his information from?
Well, I don't know, but of course the media was doing their job, so I'm making an assumption or an observation.
It's either, or an insight.
Or an insight is somehow Rory leaked a story that somebody told him that Jay is going to possibly resign. And that was in the paper.
That took over the whole thing.
Took over. So what happened was, to the reason somebody called and said, what's going on, Mike? I said, I had no idea. And he said, well, go and look at the Times-Union. It says, Jay Stowe is going to possibly resign. Then another person called and said, you better look at what Bobby Stein said. So what happened was, to Mike's point, Jay was brought in, which he, they brought him in. He sort of calmed the waters. But then all of a sudden, 3 or 5 days ago, a story gets put on the Times-Union and out on the media that Jay's going to resign. But nobody can say anything, but Rory's out there churning the water. Now, again...
Well, Mike Hightower, there was some things that started coming out that were really bad optics for the JEA and for Stowe, I think. The story that 4 senior executives with very important, high-level, high-paid jobs didn't live in Jacksonville, New Jersey. Yeah, New Jersey and stuff. And then there was the Christmas party that cost $72,000 at the Florida Theater. So the optics of that were bad.
But to go back and answer your story, so what happened was, while you see these people were all this thing popping up, Jay came in, calmed the waters, spent a lot of time going out there and talking with employees. He went out there and talked to a lot of the union people. If you remember, it was the union folks that gave him a plaque for thanking him. It was what was not said or the rationale for why this is happening. And that never came up, except when you read the Times-Union, which will be tomorrow morning, Wednesday. This will be a week when people see this. It talks about, by the chairman, says that on major issues, we as the board and Jay wanted to go in different directions. Now, the problem was that couldn't be said until David Byerline put that in there. But as we all know, when you're at a board meeting and the members can't talk, or because they haven't talked to each other, they're sort of in the dark until somebody starts talking. And it was very awkward because Jay was there, and it was known that he was going to resign, but he never said why, and the chairman never really said why. So you have this lack of transparency and lack of understanding, and you've got to think of it to underscore what Mike Tolbert just said. When all these things popped up on the screen, is what's going on. And I will tell you, the thing that came out is sitting there yesterday with over 100 people. It came out. Is JEA for sale again? Is there something going on that we're going to be for sale? And if you remember at that meeting, there were a couple times board members or someone would say it's not for sale. But you got to understand is having what this community, but what JEA has gone through for the last 4 years with all this crap and the Zahn debacle, the people at JEA didn't understand. It was questionable. And it's what they do every day.
When there's a lack of information, something's going to fill the void.
And so the uncertainty is then you have all kinds of theories.
Yeah, and so some of the speculation and theories that I've heard, and I know you guys have probably heard, is obviously the out-of-town hires. Bobby Stein is especially big on that. He's even talking now about making it mandatory that these senior executives have to live in Jacksonville. And I don't understand, to recruit a top-level professional JEA senior staffer, you're not asking them to go live in North Dakota. you're asking them to come live in Jacksonville, Florida. So if a guy doesn't want to come live in Jacksonville that's on the senior team, I wouldn't want him either. And Bobby said that's exactly where Bobby's mind is. He's even now talking about making it a requirement. Then you had the optics of that party. That's not good. We heard about the communication gaps, the lack of communication. And you go back and remember the talk about fiduciary responsibility. It's my understanding that the JEA is about to spend $9 billion over the next 10 years on projects. But somebody better have some damn fiduciary responsibility. And of course, we've heard, Mike, I know you've heard it and I've heard it, that one of the things that got Stowe in trouble with the board was he spent a lot of money without the board's knowledge. I've heard $60 million. So that would get you in goose in the grease quick.
Given
I've heard that expression before.
I've not heard that one, but we can keep it in. Unlike some of the others that we've had on the show, this one we'll keep in the show.
The chairman opened the meeting. He let the public speak, of which Hightower spoke. Then there was a motion where he let Jay Stowe speak, and Jay had his prepared remarks, and it was no question it was a going away song. And then, if I recall right, there was a motion to accept a severance package that had already been negotiated. And then Vickie Cavey spoke, and she had a speech prepared. Great speech. I mean, I thought she covered all the bases. But I don't know how that happens that quickly, that fast, that orchestrated without somebody talking. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just a cynic, and I don't want to say that about those people because I have too much respect for them. But something doesn't play out right here.
There have been some kind of discussion between him and either Baker or whoever as far as this is what could come about if you don't accept this package that we're doing, and that is you would be terminated publicly, which obviously is going to be a bigger black mark on your record than if you decide you're going to resign.
I think the important thing is, and that we haven't talked about Vickie Cavey if we want to, but I've known Vickie from
let's talk about her.
Yeah, let me
let's talk about her.
I think it's really important
Sure,
to do this.
Go ahead.
The one thing that let me say this to begin with. Vickie Cavey is one of the most brilliant women I've ever known. Let me give you a little background on her. She is the daughter of a single parent with 5 children. She talked about it yesterday, living in a very, very small house, single mom with 5 children.
I want to share just a little of my personal history with JEA. I was raised here in Jacksonville and graduated from Sandalwood High School. I have vivid childhood memories of my widowed mother of 5 crying in our poorly insulated rental home because of our high electric bills in the 70s. She was a waitress. That was a time when JEA was among the highest electric rates in the country due to our reliance on oil and the oil embargo of 1973. Thanks to strong leadership and fuel diversity, JEA eventually had the lowest rates in the state. I became a mechanical engineer on the advice of my extraordinary math teacher, Miss Marita Ng. After graduation from UF, I joined JEA. My mom was so proud. The suit I'm wearing today is a suit that she bought for me. I wore it on my first day here at JEA as a young engineer 40 years ago. Wow, 40 years. The last time I wore it was at her funeral in 1999. I chose to wear it today in her memory and as a reminder of the people we serve and JEA's strong history of overcoming obstacles. Speaking of obstacles, we all know that electricity and water don't mix well. But JEA proved that they can when we integrated our water services from the city of Jacksonville into our independent authority in 1997, and further expanded by acquiring private utilities. We went on to provide watering services to neighboring counties as well. JEA is a municipal utility, an organization built for service. It succeeds when it's true to its purpose, providing reliable, reasonably priced utility services to the communities it serves. JEA serves this community. It doesn't sell to it for a profit. That's a different mindset. It may sound odd to say, but I love the JEA, its employees and what it stands for. Municipally owned public power and water. JEA is in my blood. I have worked with the best and brightest former and current colleagues here at JEA, many of whom are lifelong friends. I remember the day I told Paul McElroy I was going to retire. He seemed shocked and came to my office the next day to let me know that when he told his wife Linda that night that she said, and excuse me, well, hell must be freezing over if Vickie Cavey's leaving the JEA. Well, I came back once, and now a second time. I'm pretty sure this will be my last. Some folks practice intermittent fasting. I think I practice intermittent retirement. It works for me.
Her ascension up that ladder of leadership in JEA, it's a little bit like the first time they put a woman trying to get going, a woman to go through the military academy, and we'll leave it at that. But she was there. She has always been very, very focused on what she's doing. And as she went up that ladder, and I can tell you, she was a huge help to me. She remembered what it was like when you didn't understand or you didn't have someone to help you. So as she went up that ladder, she really sort of helped the people around her and helped them understand what she was doing. And she became, when I was on the board, as I talked about not understanding what's in the board, she sensed any of us on the board, if you need some help, she could explain it to us. And she reached out to us because she said, you're providing this service for free, you don't get paid. And so she was always there. But she also, as she got leadership, as she ascended into leadership, she made sure that all the people who reported to her knew as much as she did, and she also made sure these are my decisions and why I made it. She was an incredible mentor. So from the time that she was there, when she was there for when Walt Bussell was there, all the way through all these CEOs, she's always been part of a leadership team. She's always been close to that CEO. They've always relied on her because she's also been one of the person that was about strategy. And strategy at JEA is about finance, and it's about infrastructure and those things which are in her wheelhouse. And so she has always been sort of counsel to the senior leadership team of that place. And then she was there. And she's also been of counsel for the board, always there. So when, if you remember, it was Bobby and Marty and John Baker that said, we want to bring her in. So but a lot of people, the people at JEA did not know what I just said, because there's 2,000 of them and most of them are in the field, so they didn't understand who Vickie Cavey was. Mm-hmm. So the question came up, and I think that's where Mike Tolbert was going, is who is this woman who is now the interim CEO? Again, lack of communication, lack of understanding. Now I think, to answer a question that Mike said earlier, I said there were a couple of questions. What Vickie's going to have to do is Vickie's going to have to go in there in small groups, and is going to have to sit down and eyeball them. And that's the lineman. I mean, it's everybody. And she's going to have a no BS conversation with them and look them in the eye and have to answer their tough questions. And I can tell you from what Mike saw on as he watched it yesterday, what I heard while I was there, it's how transparent, how authentic she is going to be. And I really will, this is what I'm going to say. I really believe that in the next six months, that when people go back and say, what do you think of Vickie Cavey, they're going to say, it was a great decision by the board to pick him. But right now, there's uncertainty. But I will tell you, I have a great deal of faith in Vickie Cavey.
Let me ask you one final question before we move on. If you were asked to help put together the profile of the next CEO for the JEA, what would you put on that list? Considering all the upheaval that we've had, all of the questions since the Zahn thing came about, what qualities should that new candidate have?
I'm going to be very biased.
That's all right.
I'm going to be very biased.
That's why I didn't ask Tolbert.
Well, let me tell you, and I talked about this yesterday. Having been on that board for 16 years and then 4 years inside. What I would say is, the first thing is, let's make sure there is nobody within JEA that can do the job. JEA is unique. It is a family. You got to understand the culture of JEA. I know you can bring in a CEO and all that, but given what we have gone through in the last 4 years, 5 years, now given yesterday, this community and the JEA employees, we've got to settle them down, and we've got to settle everybody down and make sure, to this point, is there not somebody within this community? Is there not somebody within JEA who can be the next long-term CEO? If you can't find that, then let's go back. But I can tell you, when you go back and look at from Bucell all the way up to Paul McElroy, they grew up with that institutional knowledge. They know JEA, they know this community, and you've got to understand that. Just bringing somebody in here who knows finance or know an engineer isn't going to do it.
By the way, Hightower is not putting his name in for that job. Just to quash any rumors that might be spreading around out there based on what he just said.
By the way, yes, I did get, probably as of yesterday, I did get an application to be a Walmart greeter in North Carolina.
Mine is always plastic or paper. That's all I get. All right, let's talk about the Laura Street Trio.
Yes.
Whatever's going on with it. Once again, we have to explain to our viewers and listeners that this is being recorded now on Tuesday, the 16th of April. Tomorrow, on the 17th, the DIA has their board meeting. At that meeting, they're going to look at that proposal, actually, that Matt Carlucci sort of talked about when he was on our program back last December. But from what I heard today from Matt Carlucci's assistant, is that the bill that they're going to be discussing tomorrow is not the same bill. And that's 2023-869, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that includes some of the more controversial aspects to it, including the hotel, which they did not like. They being the mayor didn't like it, and neither did the DIA staff. And number two, the $22 million loan guarantee, if you will, the pot of money that they were going to put in there so that the city would underwrite any of the loans and we would pay them if Steve Atkins could not. So what this is ultimately going to look like, even Matt Carlucci's office says, I don't have a copy of it. So I wasn't able to get a copy for us to take a look at to see what they're going to be debating tomorrow. So with that, what do you guys think?
One of the things that I think I've noticed going on here recently with all of this conversation about Atkins, we've said it before. It doesn't appear that Atkins either wants or has the ability to get the financial backing other than from the city. It doesn't look like he's getting the backing he wants from the city. And he has threatened to tear the project down, perhaps. He says he will not let the city sell it. And one of the things that seems to have happened here is I remember a time when Steve Atkins was the guy on the white horse who was going to come in and help save downtown. He did the Barnett Tower really nice. And he was going to do the Laura Street Trio. But over time, he's become more of the guy that is in the way. I've gotten that impression. I mean, when the mayor came out and said what she said about more options, wanting more options, I think that pretty much sealed his deal. So I wouldn't be surprised if whatever happens tomorrow. But it may be the final Steve Atkins act in this saga.
We will find out by next week. And speaking of next week, anything else you want to add here before we close things up?
The parallel between what happened yesterday at JEA and this conversation, or what Mike just said, this whole program tonight is about things that people don't understand and what's not been said, and where are we?
Yep.
And so this has been the week of what's going on in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I bet we should change that. But I think Mike raises a lot of issues of, one, how unless you know exactly what you're doing and unless there is collaboration and understanding and communication, that you can go from, as you use the analogy, the person on the white horse that's going to be it, to the other person that is now being viewed as a barrier or
an obstructionist.
Obstructionist. And so there, again, going back to what we talked about on the other thing, there's something else going on here, and we're dealing with taxpayer money, but we're also dealing with something that is now, I think, got the emotional button on a lot of people. I think you talk to people and say they don't exactly understand what the trio is, but they think it's important and it's part of our heritage, but they can't understand is why can't the adults get in a room and figure this out?
See, I've got a different point of view on that thing. I think people are taking a look at that and they're saying, let me see here. What, $38 million for the trio, $1 billion for a new jail, $1.4 billion for a new stadium. How much more money are we going to continue spending on developing that section of town, when you take a look at it all the way from the sports district all the way to the downtown core, and people are still saying, and we talked about this before, when are they going to pick up my garbage on time? When are they going to fill that pothole? When are they going to do all of these other things which directly impact people on a daily basis? I think that's going to be one of the narratives that we're going to be hearing throughout this whole process. But that's yet to be determined.
Yeah.
Yet to be determined.
I think when we're back here a week from now, I think we're all going to know a little bit more.
Well, we're going to know a lot more about the school system because Dr. Lori Hershey is going to be joining us next week here in studio. And she's a school board member, of course. And she's retiring, by the way. She's actually termed out, I believe, after this session. But she's going to be on with us. We're going to talk about all of the things, the proposed closings, the proposed mergers, the construction costs, and, of course, all of the other situation, including finding a new superintendent. So all of that's going to be with Lori Hershey next week.
Yeah, and one of the issues I just, that I read, I think, when Dr. Green was being considered for the superintendent, there were 26 applicants. About a year ago, when they were looking for someone to replace her, they had 10 applicants. 5, and they ended up 5 were not there, so they went out again. I just found out they've got 5. I mean, we're now down to 5, and there is if you go on social media, 2 of that 5 should not even be in the running.
Well,
so there's going to be a lot of questions I think people are asking about, or we will be asking Lori Hershey. When you're down to 4 or 5 or 3 applicants for a size of a school system, where are we?
Yeah.
But I mean, I was stunned when I saw that there were only 5. I'm not shocked. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised that it was only 5.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate it. Let us know what you think of the podcast. We have lots of places where you can leave comments on our website, on our Facebook page, or any of the podcast platforms that you might look at. Thanks for joining us, and have a good week, everybody.
Yo, take care. Thanks.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.